So, folks, there's been a lot of Ukraine news in these past 24 hours. Obviously, the morning kind of started off with, here we have Reuters, 8:08 a.m. this morning, Russia's Medvedev, we'd have to use a nuclear weapon if Ukrainian offensive was a success. So starting the day off with some pretty alarming talk. And then just a few minutes before we went on the air, it broke that there's been another drone strike inside of Russian territory. And Zelensky is now boasting that the war is returning to Russia as a sign of strength. So we obviously have some very, very troubling escalation in Ukraine within the past 24 hours. And so that is a good setup to this little piece of video we have. Famous filmmaker Oliver Stone sat down with Russell Brand and admitted that he regrets having voted for Joe Biden, given all this chaos around the world that's ensued. Let's hear him.
This is the same situation as World War I, in a sense. The stupidity of it because of the alliances and the fears and the built-up phobias. If we don't stop this, what Biden is doing, this guy is, I voted for him. I made a mistake. I'm thinking that he was an old man now, that he would calm down, he'd be more mellow and so forth. I didn't see that at all. I see a man who maybe is not in charge of his own administration, who knows?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, look, I personally did not vote for Joe Biden. Had I would sympathize with his regret there, and I do sympathize to an extent with his regret. But he said, I was expecting that maybe he'd be older and more mellow now, and now maybe he's not in charge of what's going on. Well, those two things are connected, right? Him being more mellow now in his old age makes him more dangerous than if he were younger and had all his wits about him. Because now that he's this old man who nobody really believes is running anything, now the people running things are the Jake Sullivans, who I talk about all the time. Just these shadowy advisors who we don't know anything about. We don't vote for. We don't know who they are, how they think, how they operate. They are president now, more or less. And so the fact that he is older and perhaps mellower, that makes him more dangerous, not less.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're having Thomas Frank on Wednesday, and in his book, The People Know, he talks about this moment, ironically, in FDR's administration, where government became professionalized, where this idea of government being run by academics and people from the best schools. But FDR was hiring renegade academics who were very contrary to the prevailing theories of the time, which were very laissez-faire economics, hands off. But I believe he quotes FDR as saying that if he turned the country over to all of the best and leading academics, the country would be finished in 4 months. This is kind of what's happened. You've had this professionalization of government, not with people who are going against the grain, not with people who are questioning the status quo, but with people who are very inside the box, groupthink kind of people whose opinions reflect the ideas of an extremely decadent, arrogant, and out of touch aristocracy. And whenever an aristocracy gets to that point, they're very far removed from any real meaningful basis for their power. They're dangerous to the public because they're morons. They're people who talk about sending fucking 1,000 people to live in sulfuric acid. These are the kinds of people making decisions for a population of hundreds of millions of people. They're fundamentally dangerous. They are too far removed from any people in their family or in their ancestry who ever had to face the raw realities of survival to make practical decisions for a nation.
Exactly. All right, let's play.
But he's going to fall down somewhere. But it seems that he's dragging us stupidly into a confrontation with a power that's not going to give.
That's the thing. They're not going to give. They just made a nuclear threat today. What do you think is going to happen, right? What do you think is going to happen? And so, look, Tara Reid actually quote tweeted him earlier saying, hey, there were a lot of us who warned that war with Russia is on the agenda once a Democrat takes over. We were warning about that in 2016, and people thought we were insane. Yeah. I remember saying very, very explicitly, back then I was just a Facebook shitposter. That's how Russell and I met, as Facebook shitposters who happened to cross paths. But I said, don't be surprised if we are in a hot war with Russia by this time, 2017, if the election goes the other way. People, oh, that's crazy. You're fear-mongering this. And, well, here we are. Here we are.
Yeah. Well, because at this point, I think, and this is what gets so confusing about the vocabulary. I mean, it's not even right and left anymore. It's the entrenched elite establishment versus everybody else. What's really different, and what I really want to get into with Frank on Wednesday, is the forces that he describes as having been the populist forces before. I don't think anybody can argue that those forces are not better represented, at least within the political system and the voting process, by Trump's movement, right? I mean, if you look at a lot of that populist energy, like, where is it? It's not that it doesn't exist on the left. It's that within the left, it's not being expressed through the political system in terms of the Democratic Party, right? Like, there's no movement like that poised to take over or keeping them on the run or on their back heels or forced to negotiate with that populist left. And that's discussed there too, that you had demagogues then as well. You had your Huey Longs, you had your Father Conklins, right? You had people pop up like that. And, so you did have that kind of demagoguery that played on populism, but it was far outweighed by the real thing, which tended to be left, which I think is still left. I mean, when you look at that Bernie Sanders town hall where the whole Fox News audience claps for his entire agenda, it could still be that. But today, for whatever reason, and this is something to really examine, the forces of the establishment have been able to crush. They were able to crush that movement, which left a very wide lane for the demagogue version of populism that Trump represents.
Please clap.